Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. Took a little bit to get everything set up. But before we begin our study, let's have a word of prayer. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we are thankful for this new week and this new week of morning studies. And we are thankful, Lord, for the blessings of this past week and the Sabbath. And we just ask, Lord, that as we open your word together, that you can guide and direct in our personal studies, in our personal lives. And as we continue to dig further into your word to understand how these things apply to us presently. And so we ask that you can be with each person, that you can enlighten our minds, that you can help us to open our hearts to you, to receive these things, that you can strengthen us, that we can obey your word, and that we can be a blessing to those around us. So be with us now, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so a couple of things. So Stephen's study got me thinking that I really need to do a new series on the principles of prophetic interpretation. And so I'd written a paper months ago called The Principles of Prophetic Interpretation. And I figured we should go through each of the points and use practical illustrations. And so that we understand, because I did a presentation like on the biblical use of numbers last Sabbath or something. And so understanding how to use numbers and how to interpret them. Because, Stephen, there's things that you're doing that are correct and things that you're doing that are incorrect. So we need to address those and see how we use numbers properly and how we interpret them. So I want to do a series on that. Not that I'm the expert on how to interpret things, but we've laid down some principles in how we've studied in the past. And this is pretty interesting, the study that Stephen did. One is because we are studying right now Nehemiah, and basically he tied Nehemiah to yesterday, that is to July 4th, 2026, 250th anniversary of the United States. We tied it to Trump, but the question is, how do we interpret that? And so as I was on my walk this morning, I was thinking through, and I spent a bit of time yesterday as well, thinking more this morning specifically about what is the relationship between Nehemiah's reforms and the reforms that Trump is bringing about in the United States. And so that means the studies that we're going to be doing on, I'll be taking this Sabbath, and then Stephen's going to do the Sabbath after that. But I think this Sabbath coming up, I'll start the study on the principles of prophetic interpretation, and Stephen will have a Sabbath study, and then I'll come back to that. But there's a whole bunch of things then that start to come together. Now Stephen, can I ask you a question? You're available, right? So, okay. So in your, when you did the presentation yesterday, unlike, you and I are different in how we present things. So you never really kind of tell us what your conclusions are. You just present a bunch of data points and then you allow the person to sort of figure out what they mean, right? But what do you think it meant that you brought together these things from the 70-week prophecy, especially that tied it to Nehemiah, and then to Trump? Did you have any conclusions about that? For people just watching these morning studies, they'd have to watch Stephen's presentation from yesterday. So Stephen, do you have any conclusions? What is it that you would see in what you were doing?
Okay, so I just sort of realized I was presenting on the 4th of July as the 250th. So I was just kind of looked to see if there's anything of interest that numerically connect to that particular date. So that's just a few things that came up with what I thought was of interest. I wasn't really making any, as you say, sort of application as how to say. I was just kind of putting it out there. I don't know. I don't really have any particular application to make from what I was observing, but I've just sort of thought this is of interest. We can maybe consider it,
Yeah, and it's interesting too because on June 25th we had introduced. It's when we first looked at the 25th day of the 6th month in the book of Nehemiah, right? So we had this June 25th date, which is 625 on our calendar, relating to Nehemiah's 625, and you had a 625 in your study. So I think, so we could look at what you presented yesterday as sort of providential. Now, of course, you're looking at July 7th, and then you're trying to see, or July 7th, I always keep saying July 7th, July 4th, Independence Day, and you're looking at, okay, what can we connect to that? Now, were you specifically trying to connect Nehemiah to July 4th? Or was it just that you wanted to connect the 70 weeks? Like, why choose the 70 weeks?
I just seen when you do some multiplication with the 250 that there was connections then to Nehemiah's the date.
Okay, so you started with 250 times 250 and you got 444,000, and then that
250 squared is 625.
250 times 250, yeah.
1776 times 250 is 444.
Oh, it's 7. Okay, so what was the 250 squared?
Yeah, so 250 times 250 is 660.
Okay, right. So that gave us the 6 month 25th day, right?
Yes.
And then you did 250 times 1776. Is that what you did?
Yeah, so you get the 444.
Okay. Yeah. So you got 444, and then so you got the 25th day of the 6th month in 444 BC.
Yes.
So that's where you started, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Okay. So that means that we're tying this to the story of Nehemiah. So we would have to look at Nehemiah's reforms as connected to Trump's reforms then, right?
Yeah, so just on the 26th of July, you had this here panel. This guy stands up and talks about the wall of separation between church and state.
On the 25th of June, you mean?
Sorry, yes, the 26th of June, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So he stands up, says there's a wall. There's the idea of a wall of separation between church and state is not in the Constitution. And
right.
They're sort of have this here panel, and they have these here propositions. You've Ben Carson there as well.
Yeah.
Reading.
Okay.
I think there's like 12 proposals.
So then what do you draw from that? So you're going to take that as what?
Well, they're looking to bring down the wall of separation between church and state. That's what the guy says. So I'm just saying that's what he's saying. Yeah. So I'm connecting wall on Jeremiah's.
What's the guy's name? What's the guy's name?
I think it was a person called Dan Patrick. I think I was the person. He was talking about that. Yeah.
So he's the head of the Religious Liberty Commission, or what is he?
Yeah, he's a Texas lieutenant governor.
Okay.
Sparked controversy by claiming that the separation of church and state is the biggest lie told in America. It's AI, asserting that the concept is not actually written in the U.S. Constitution. He frequently argued that the wall of separation is a myth used by critics to remove religion from public life.
Right. Now, he's probably correct, though. Right?
Well, Jefferson, I think he came up with the idea that based on the First Amendment, that you have this here, he sort of expounded The First Amendment.
But you can see that he's correct when it comes to what people mean by the wall of separation in church and state, that's not what Jefferson was talking about.
Jefferson was applying it to, because you had they were like deists, they were various denominations and so forth, so they were just emphasizing like a separation between church and state. In a sense, there's not going to be making a law that's kind of enforcing.
Right. Yeah. Right. So Patrick would be correct that it's being misused.
Well, there would be arguments in the left that there would be people who would be misusing it for sure.
Yeah. So we would need to look at what he means and in the context of it, and also then how that would relate to Nehemiah's reforms. Because the natural tendency, for Seventh-day Adventists is, to jump the gun and say, well, this is right. This is the Sunday law. They're going to bring in the Sunday law. But we can see that what they're trying to do is actually protect religious liberty, not take it away. So we can see that the separation of church and state has been used to restrict religious liberty in the United States rather than promote religious liberty. So that would be his argument. Okay. Yeah. So we can see, we can look at the numbers. We can see that we have this tie to Trump, and so we're not going to do that today particularly. But if we can tie Trump to this religious reform, we would have to look at what this religious reform was about. Now, we also know that Nehemiah's reforms ultimately failed, right? In 444. So when we get to chapter 13 and we're dealing with the 32nd year of Nehemiah, we would have to say, well, what is this referring to? Now, this one, we had studied on Thursday that we have a date here, but it's kind of hidden. So in Nehemiah 13, we're going to have 12 years after 444, right? So instead of which was in the 20th year of Artaxerxes, now we're in the 30th year of Artaxerxes. And we're saying that it's 4,440 days after the reading of the book of the law in 444, right? Is that what we had decided?
Theodore, I got a question.
Okay.
So let me ask this. So if the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting or the establishment of religion. Now, if Congress goes in and whether it's for the good or for the bad, it's violating that first sentence, is it not?
I don't know what you mean.
Well, if they go in there and make a law saying that, everybody has First Amendment rights, it's like them saying that you didn't have it before, right?
I don't understand what you're asking.
If Congress makes a law.
So Congress can't make a law respecting religion. So is Congress making a law respecting religion?
It says respecting or establishment of religion.
Right. So Congress isn't doing that, are they?
Not that I know of, but you was talking about it, and I was wanting to know.
Well, I'm saying that what they have done is they've secularized the state in the sense that it ends up persecuting. What we have is a religion that is a secular religion that is in the United States. The religion has taken over, but it's just not the Christian religion.
Well, you said Donald Trump maybe I heard you say it wrong. I don't know.
Well, Donald Trump isn't Congress, but Donald Trump is a reformer, right? We parallel him to Cyrus, to Xerxes, to Artaxerxes, to Josiah. So Donald Trump is providing an opportunity for religious revival in the United States. He's part of that. You can see that his presidency has definitely changed the tenor of what's happening in the United States as far as religion is concerned, right? That is, people are, he's calling for a return to God, not to a particular religion per se. But he's also not Congress. He's not saying that we should establish a law respecting religion. Now, that probably will happen in the future, right? So we could say things are being set up for
I
that.
just misunderstood you. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm not sure what you misunderstood.
Well, I was thinking that, see, to me, if it says Congress shall make no law respecting or establishing a religion, that means they shouldn't be even talking about it.
No, that's not what that means.
What does it mean?
It means that you cannot make it that somebody has to belong to a particular religion in
That's
order
right.
to
I agree with
be a part of the American government. So you can't have a state religion that's required for people to follow. Right? You can't enforce religion upon the state. Right? And the reason they did that is because they didn't want the state to be persecuting people who believe differently. But we have that already with the secularism, right? Because we see the persecution. In Canada, we have it really clearly. We have a secular government that hates Christians, and so we have religious oppression in Canada.
Okay.
And it's all through the court system and through the government system. If you try to,
I just misunderstood you. That's all.
Yeah, okay, but I'm not sure what I said that you misunderstood, because I didn't really say anything about that. All I'm saying is that Trump is a reformer that we parallel with these other histories. So we can tie him through Stephen's study. We can tie Trump to Nehemiah's reforms, and specifically 444, right? So that is under the decree of Artaxerxes' second decree, right?
Okay.
Now then we have in Nehemiah 13, which is a symbol of rebellion, we have 12 years later, and this is going to be 4,400 days after the book of the law was read in 444, right?
Right.
So that is, we're saying that on that day they read the book of Moses. We're saying on that day is the first day of the seventh month.
Right.
That this isn't, they're not referring back to 444, they're referring to 432. Right? So in 432 BC, they're going to read the book of the law again, just like they did in 444. And this time when they read it, they find that the Ammonite and the Moabite should not come into the congregation of God forever. So we would have to try to figure out what Nehemiah's final reforms refer to and how we would tie that into our history. So Stephen has given us a key that we can look at this history that we've been studying, that we studied last week, Nehemiah's reforms, and particularly, we had started obviously the week before, right? So on the 25th day of the 6th month, we had looked at the 25th day of the 6th month. And then we spent last week studying this, and also I had made a mistake in some of my studies, right? So having to do with the Day of Atonement. So we spent time looking at that. So the Day of Atonement is hidden in the book of Nehemiah. We have things that are hidden. Here we have another thing that's hidden that it's not obvious on the surface. It doesn't say the first day of the 7th month, but it says on that day they read the book of Moses in the audience of the people. Right. So this is going to be in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes. This is going to be in 432. Right. Any thoughts on this so far from other people? Thanks, William, for those comments, because that's very helpful. So can we agree that that Stephen's study that points to 444 and ties it to Trump, that also when we get to the 32nd year and it's 4,440 days after the first day of the 7th month in 444, that is another clue. It's another piece of information we need to pay attention to understand the role of Nehemiah 13. Because if 444 is Trump's reforms, what is it that happens in 432? And what's the significance of 432 as a number? We had noted that 432, it is, well, if you take 12 times 360, you get 4320, right? So 432 is related to 12 years, and this is 12 years after 444. Okay. Do people need to see the math of this, what I'm talking about? Are people following this discussion so far? You're not following it? Okay, so let's do it this way. I'm going to go, we're going to take our time because I'm probably jumping ahead too quickly. So we're going to have some dates here. So we got Artaxerxes' decrees, but I'm going to put over here, so there's a few more things that we need to put into place. Is over here we got the first day of the 7th month in 432. We know that we also have the first day of the 7th month over here in 444. We just didn't put all of that in. Okay, so if we put the first day of the 7th month here in 444, we know that the number of days between these two events, just do it this way. So it's 4,440 days between here. Okay, that makes sense. You can see that. Now we also know that this is a period of 12 years. So you're going to have 12 years, and then that is 12 times 360 equals 4320. So I could have probably just put 12 times 360. Does that make sense to people what I'm doing here? So you can see how this this period of 12 years between the first day of the first month, first day of the 7th month, and the first day of the 7th month ties us to 444 BC, but also the 12 years ties us to 432 BC. Any comment on that? Everybody understands this clearly? There's no disambiguity?
So, I'm just wondering about identifying what chapter and verse is the first day, 7th month, and then years.
So in chapter 13, right? So maybe you weren't here for that study. So when we went through chapter 13 here in Nehemiah, it says, on that day they read the book of Moses in the audience of the people. So we went through this and we recognized that this is actually on the first day of the 7th month in 432, right? This isn't referring to back in 444. This becomes an annual event. They're going to read the book of the law on the first day of the 7th month, right? So that's why they say in verse 6, but in all this time was not I in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, came I unto the king, and after certain days obtained leave of the king. So Nehemiah, 12 years after the reforms in 444, he's for that 12 years, he's gonna go back to Babylon. He's the cupbearer of Artaxerxes. But then in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, he's going to go back to Jerusalem, right? So this isn't really written in order. We're not sure I believe that he would have been here on the first day of the 7th month when they read the book of Moses in the audience of the people. So he would have come here sometime before that. And so he's going to talk about this, how they see that they shouldn't have an Ammonite or a Moabite come into the congregation of God forever. And yet we have this Ammonite, Tobiah. He's got this the chamber, right? So he's in this chamber that's connected to the sanctuary. Does that make sense, Stephen?
But yeah, I'm just asking where does it we get the first day of the 7th month? Is it just from the 32nd year of Artaxerxes?
It's the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, but they're reading the book of the law of Moses to the people. They would do that on the first day of the 7th month, just as they did in 444. So we're saying that this would be an annual event that they're going to read the book of the law. Or if it's not an annual event, they choose to do it again when Nehemiah comes again. But I would think that they would have been practicing this. They would have continued to read the book of the law. And so he's going to refer to this, right? On the day that they read the book of the law of Moses in the audience of the people, they're going to find out that an Ammonite and a Moabite should not come into the congregation of the house forever. And then he goes, because they met not the children of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them, and that he should curse them. Howbeit our God turned the curse into a blessing, right? So he's going to refer back to this whole thing of Balaam. And then it says, now it came to pass when they heard the law that they separated from Israel all the mixed multitude. So they're going to do this. They're going to recognize, okay, we need to follow this reform. And then he says, before this, that is, and we looked at this as well. So it doesn't mean that this is something that happened before this, because that word before just means in the face of, right? So in the face of this, Eliashib, the priest, having oversight of the chamber and of the house of God, was allied unto Tobiah. So all we know is that this is something that was done openly, that there is this alliance between Eliashib and Tobiah, which has to do with an alliance through marriage, right? For he had prepared for him a great chamber, where aforetime they laid meat offerings, frankincense, and the vessels and the tithes of the corn and the new wine and the oil, which was commanded to be given to the Levites and the singers and the porters and the offerings of the priests. So this is something that they had promised that they would do under Nehemiah's reforms, which they're not doing, right? So now, but for all this time was not I at Jerusalem. So now he's going to go back and say, here's what happened while I was gone. And so I came again to Jerusalem in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes. So that means that this reading of the book of the law is happening in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes' reign. And so it's not referring back to 444. When I first read it, I thought they were just reading about, like, referring back to in 444 when they read the book of the law. But then when you read through this, you realize that this is in 432 that they're reading the book of the law, and they're again renewing these reforms. That's the way that I'm understanding it. Does that make sense? Rand put here something. And Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, in the solemnity of the year of release, in the Feast of Tabernacles, when all Israel is come to appear before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose, thou shalt read this law before all Israel in their hearing. Yeah, so we know that they were originally supposed to read the book of the law on the Feast of Tabernacles, right? According to Deuteronomy 31:10. Now we can see the 31:10 lines up with Nehemiah 13:1 in the sense it's got the 131 there. But we know in 444 they're going to do that on the first day of the 7th month. Anyway, Stephen, does that help how we understand this?
We're just getting the first day of the 7th month. A wee bit of a just sanctified, maybe speculation.
It's speculation. There's no doubt it's speculation, but it's logical. It would be a logical inference. It's not just a wild guess, because we know that they read the book of the law on the first day of the 7th month in 444. So if you go to the first day of the 7th month in 432, it is going to be 4,440 days apart. Mm-hmm. Right? So whether they're actually reading the book of the law on the first day of the 7th month still is not really the main point, because they could be reading it at the Feast of Tabernacles. The point is they're reading it in 432. And if you count from the first day of the 7th month to the first day of the 7th month, you still get that symbol for 444. And then we know 12 years, right? 12 times 360 gives us 4,320. So the 4,320 points to the 432. That makes sense. So we can see that these dates are tied together because of the number of days between these two dates, and the fact that they're 12 years apart witnesses to this date and this date. So can you see that? Does that make sense?
Yes, I do see it. It is an interesting numeric connection.
Right. Yeah, because it's a double witness, right? The 12 years gives us 432, and the 12 years also gives us the 444 in a very similar way with that extra zero. So the fact that we have 2 years that are 12 years apart, if we multiply them by a prophetic year, 360, we get the last date. If we just look at the number of days between it, we get the first date. Okay. Now, yeah, we could be wrong, that is in Nehemiah 13, maybe it's not on the first day of the 7th month that they're reading the book of the law, though I think that is a logical inference, that they're going to be doing it based upon the language that's being there. So on that day, so the way that it reads in Hebrew, you got this common word, he, who, whatever you want to be, it depends how it's spelled here. So it's basically the first person pronoun, right? So it has lots of different meanings. This, those, these, who, which, he, she, her, it, right? So it's got lots of different meanings, but it's referring then to a specific day, right? On that day. And the question is, well, what is that day? Out of the context here, if you're reading in chapter 12, right, you're going to have all this about the service of the temple and so forth, right? So it's not following something that just happened specifically before, but it is referring to a specific day, right? So the question is, what specific day would it be referring to? Well, it would have to refer to a day. So originally when I read it, because of the Hebrew, I thought, well, it's referring to the day that they read the book of the law in 444. But then when you read through it, it's obvious that this is happening in 432, not 444. And so the specific reference to this day, giving it the personal pronoun day, means that it is a specific day. So it must be the day in which the book of the law is to be read. Right, the book of Moses is to be read on that day. Now, it could then be the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, but it also could be the first day of the 7th month, considering that's when they read it in 444. Right? So does that help a bit further?
Yeah, so I just checked it. So 4,400 days?
4,440 days.
No, it's 4,400.
Oh, you're right. It is 4,400. Okay. Thanks for correcting me. Yeah, so it's 4,400 days. Okay. Still, which relates, so that's not as strong, but it still relates to 444. Right? Yeah, so I don't know why my brain, but it is 4,440. 4,400 days, yeah, which makes sense. So that's still going to relate to 444. But thanks for correcting that. So the 44 would still relate to 44, right? The 444. Would have been better if it was 4,440, but yeah. And that makes much more sense because the difference there is 80 days in the 12 years, right? Between an actual year and, so the 40 would be 120 days difference which would be too much. Okay. So we got the 4,400 days and the 4,320 days. But would you agree that the 4,400 still relates to 444?
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we got so we have this connection between these days and between these years. Okay. So I'll go back to this diagram. Now, so we have these reforms. So the question that we had about these reforms, so if we're going to relate these reforms, so we have the reforms here. This is, Artaxerxes' decree, the 20th year of Artaxerxes. We have the 4th day of the 5th month because that's going to be the day in which they begin to build the walls, right? So we would have to put over here the 52 days. right? So I'll put this in here, 52 days. Correct? That's how we came to understand it. We don't start the 52 days on the first day of the fifth month. So what I'm trying to say here is we have the first day of the fifth month here. I'm going to put this underneath. So you got the first day of the fifth month. That's when he's going to arrive at Jerusalem, right? So he's going to arrive on the first day of the fifth month, and then they're going to commence building on the fourth day of the fifth month. And then that's going to be 52 days to the 25th day of the sixth month. Okay? So is there anything that we would do with that? So we got the 3 days in there as well. I'm going to take this 3 days there. Okay, so we got 3 days between the first day of the fifth month and the fifth day of the fourth month. Now, were you here, Stephen, when we went through specifically why the fourth day of the fifth month is? Because he's been there 3 days, and then that night he's going to go and look at the walls. Did you see that study at all?
Yeah, you sort of connect it with arriving on Thursday. He's going to wait until the Sabbath then before he actually.
All right. So it's going to be on the Sunday, and that's going to line up specifically just as it does in over here. So I'm going to just borrow this.
457.
Yeah, in 457. Yeah. Okay. So if I put this over here, I'm going to just do the same thing. Oops. I'm going to do it this way instead. I'm going to copy this whole thing and just move it over. I can put this whole thing over here. So you got the first day of the fifth month and the fifth day of the fourth month over here, just as you do over here. Now, when we looked at the number of days between the first day of the fifth month in 457 and the first day of the fifth month in 444, that was 4,832 days. Is there any significance in 4,832? If we went from, let me see, now the inclusive count, if we go from the first day of the fifth month in 457 to the fifth day of the fourth month in 444. So I'll show you what I mean here. So if we go from this date here to this date over here, this is going to be up 4,836 days, which is significant. Does anybody know what 4,836 represents? Well, that's an inclusive count. So I'll just put an I beside it. So inclusive count from there to there, you see, that would be 391 years. If you take it as months, that is 4,836 months is 391 years. That's the number of months in 142,810 days. That makes sense to anybody? So just as a symbol, 4836 represents the 391 years from 1449, July 27, 1449 to July 27, 1840. Okay. So Angela notes that 1/4 of 4320 is 1,080, reminding us of the 15 fathoms, right? Also the number of parts in an hour. So 4320 parts ends up being 4 hours of time, right? Okay. Thanks, Angela. So what would this tell us if we're going to take this symbol dealing with? Because Stephen, in your study, you had 2,770. If you added, what was it, 457? You added 457 plus. How did you do that? Plus 345.
457. 27, 34, 408, and 1844. So that was 2520 plus 250.
Okay. Now you didn't. Yeah. So So you did. So you did 457 plus 408 plus 27
Mm-hmm.
plus 34
Mm-hmm.
plus 1844. Yeah, and you got the 2770. And so that would represent July 27th, right? From Josiah Litch's prophecy.
Do, yeah.
Okay, right. So we would take that represents that. So what would Josiah Litch's prophecy have to do with Nehemiah's reforms or with Trump? Or is this just some random thing that doesn't apply? Now again, you see what I'm doing here is I have those two periods of 3 days, right? So that's why I can mark them, but I'm marking the beginning of the 3 days and the end of the 3 days to get that 4,836 days, which I see as a symbol related to the 391 years. So we have in your calculations, we have the 2770, and which ties us to July 27th. That is, it ties us to July 27th. 1449 to July 27th, 1840, which is 142,810 days, which is the 391 years. Okay. Anything else that we can do with this? Because right now we're just analyzing. So we can see that there is a logic here because of the 3 days. And now we can also say, well, we could try to say, well, we just go from the first day of the first month to the first day of the fifth month. But when we used 3 days before, we went to included the 3 days in those counts, both periods of 3 days. And then Stephen's study's given us this July 27th date. He's also taken from that, he's just subtracted 2520 to get the 250. Now, why would you choose the 2520 to subtract from the 2770, Stephen?
Well, you have the 1844 being the terminus, the 2520.
Okay, but it's also the terminus of the 2300 days.
Right.
Right. Because if you subtract 2300 days, you get 470. So that gives you the 47 again, right? Which is the 4th of July. So you could have done both of them. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I think I did that, but I didn't include it. I had noticed that.
You noticed that? Okay. Yeah, so we could either just subtract the 2300 or the 2520. So that gives us a second witness to July 4th, 252 years. Well, the 252 years after the Declaration of Independence is signed, right? Okay. Now, what is it about 1776 and the Declaration of Independence? Maybe Dwight could help us with that because he knows a lot about that history. What is the significance of the Declaration of Independence as far as Nehemiah's reforms are concerned? Maybe Dwight's not there.
Well, you have a wall going up in a sense. Well, maybe more or less more the Constitution, though. But it kind of leads to the Constitution.
Okay, yeah. So it's going to lead to the Constitution. Now, when you're dealing with, because I've been having discussions, probably because it's, yesterday was American Independence Day. So you had a lot of people on Facebook posting memes about how the United States is not a Christian nation, that God isn't mentioned in the Constitution, other than, when it says in the year of our Lord, when they sign it. But in the Declaration of Independence, God is definitely mentioned as the philosophical basis for the establishment of the nation. That is, the nation is established as a Christian nation or a belief in God. That is, so even though the Constitution doesn't mention God specifically, the Declaration of Independence does. Okay, so there's a tie between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Now, Dwight, if he was here, I don't think he is. even though he's connected, he might be doing something else. But he'd be able to tell us what the tie is between those two and how that would relate. So I think there's a lot of things that we would need to look at that go back to older studies that we did regarding the United States, the rise of the United States. So we have these reforms of Nehemiah. So one of the things that we had taken that this line that we have of 457, 444, and 432 relate in some way to our lives, right? So we know that there is a relationship. And then we tried to figure out, okay, where do we put 11:9 and 9:11? How is that tied to this? So what did we say about how would we have tied these together? Initially, we had, I believe, put 457 as a parallel to 11:9 and Nehemiah's or Artaxerxes' second decree to 9:11. Yeah, so Angela put Declaration of Independence and U.S. Constitution are declarations of devolution from colony status to sovereign nation. Yeah. We have in the Declaration of Independence, we have a philosophical basis, and then we have the Constitution is more an institutional basis, right? That they're actually two different types of documents. Often we just kind of conflate them, and then you got the Bill of Rights as well and all that stuff, which as a Canadian, I don't fully understand exactly all the details of this, but we had made an argument regarding these different aspects of Artaxerxes' decrees. Now, the thing about Artaxerxes' decrees, because this is in the context of all of these other decrees, right? We have Cyrus's decree and Darius's decree. And then Artaxerxes' decree has the going forth of commandment to restore, that is the return of the people, and then the to build. Stephen, you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm not finding out 4836 connection. So you have at the fourth day of the fifth month in 457, is that correct? Or the first day of the first day of the fifth month in 457?
Yeah, so the first day of the fifth month. Yeah, so I'm counting inclusively from, pardon me, I'm counting this wrong. Yeah, so I'm counting from the first day of the 12th month. So I got to go back further. So I'm counting to these other 3 days. Thanks for correcting me here. I end up doing this too quickly. So if you're going to go back here, this is going to go here to the first day of the 12th month. So there's another period of 3 days here as well. Okay. So I'm actually counting from the end of these 3 days to the first day of the 12th month, an inclusive count to the fourth day of the fifth month. Another way we could look at this is when we count from the first day of the 12th month to the first day, I got to do this here, to the first day of the fifth month, right? That's going to be the journey that's going to be the 54 days, right?
Theodore, the United States Constitution was signed in September the 17th, 1787.
Yeah, the Constitution. Yeah,
the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, thanks. So when I'm counting this 4,836, I'm not going from the first day of the first month. I'm going from all the way back to the first day of the 12th month in 457. And that's going to bring me to the fifth day of the fourth month, or the fourth day of the fourth day of the fifth month, right? I'm saying it backwards. So this is, so you got here 107 days to between here. So let me see. This is why I need other people to correct me all the time. When I get doing things too quickly, it's much better if I do this beforehand. So this is 107 days, right? between the 12th day of the first month and the first day of the fifth month. And so what we're doing is we're going to take this span of time from here. And we know half of this is 54, which represents the fifth month, the fourth day. We can take this span of time and it brings us to the fourth day of the fifth month here. Does that help, Stephen? Now that I corrected it? Okay, so we can still see we have this tie of this number of months. Now, and all that number 4836 is it's 403, because in 491 years, well, in 491 months on our calendar is 403 lunar months, right? That's 32 years and 7 months, or 11,900 days and 1,190 minutes. So all I'm doing is I'm multiplying 12 by 403 to get 4836. Now, if I multiplied 391 times 12, I get 4692. And I don't see any alignment of that number in our chronology here. Does it mean that there isn't? Well, okay, so that's interesting. Yeah, I'm going to have to figure this out. But yeah, there is a relationship between this history. But how do I do that? Okay, so if I go here. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to have to figure that out. Okay, there's just too much math for me to do here right now. I'll figure this out for tomorrow. Because there is a relationship of 391 times 12 to this history as well. But we'll see where that is, where that fits. Okay. So anyway, we have some mathematical things that we have to sort out, but we can see the basic idea of Artaxerxes' 2 decrees, and then the 12 years later in 432, that these are all related together. Obviously, I mean, we know they are in the Bible. But we also can tie this to our history, to Trump. Now, because we've, so that is, Iran put a little note there regarding 4836. That's, is that Euler's number, Iran? Okay, so.
Yeah, that's Euler.
Yeah, pronounced Euler. But anyway, at least on all the YouTube videos. And then we got, Angela put the first day of the 12th month reversal. 12th day of the first month, January 12th, was the date of Ellen G. White's first Civil War vision in 1861. Like you're saying, the biblical date, or January 12th? I'd have to.
Yeah, January 12th, I'm almost certain was the first vision.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly. Well, I have that here. I could just click it. Oh, Civil War wasn't the right word to type in. Okay. Yeah, January 12th, 1861 is her first Civil War vision. You're correct. And then 90 days later is going to be the first day of the first month, which is April 12th, 1861. And then 100 days later is the Battle of Manassas. Right, so you got the war beginning, then you have the Battle of Manassas, which is July 21st, and then 13 days later is August 3rd, 1861, which is her second vision, where she has a vision about the Battle of Manassas. And then you have 22 weeks or 154 days to her third vision, right? So that ties us to that 154 days in Sam of the Snows. Plus we got the symbol of the 22 weeks. Yeah. So now this is part of dealing with, this was kind of the basis for the first foundation laid for understanding the Thanksgiving Day prediction, right? So we have Trump tied up into all of this history, right? That's the thing that we know, that Trump is tied up in this history as a reformer, which goes contrary to the common narrative you see within Adventism and what we had within this movement. That is, we looked at Trump as a nefarious figure, somebody who was going to bring in the Sunday law. And yet, everything that we've seen about Trump is that he's a reformer. He's typified by, sometimes, Persian kings, but Persian kings like Cyrus, who, we wouldn't necessarily say is a good person. He's not a Christian, he's not a Jew, but he's going to be called the Lord's anointed. And so we can see that Trump has that role as providing, not because of some moral character that he has, but probably in spite of it, as a reformer, calling the United States back to the worship of God. And that would have to happen in order for there to be a Sunday law. So one of the problems that we've always faced as Seventh-day Adventists is, how do we end up getting a Sunday law when we have a secular nation, a nation that's becoming more and more secular all the time? Obviously, that backlash has already occurred. We see that there's two sides to that. So you have a true religious revival that occurs within some individuals, but overall, once that the state retains its power, it's going to use that to bring in the Sunday law. And we know that there's lots of evidence that the American economy is contrary to what you often hear. But when you really listen to the experts, the people who understand what Trump's plans are, that it's actually, one is, it would be necessary for the United States to retain power. That is, if Trump had not come into power, you could never have had the United States survive where you're going to get a Sunday. That is, the United States would be dismantled. China would become the world power. It would be a completely different scenario than what's presented in Scripture. So in order to fulfill prophecy, Trump comes in, and there is a spiritual revival that does occur, a real one, but there's also a counterfeit, right? So the counterfeit revival has been going on for a long time, but that is still going to fight against the true revival. Okay, so we corrected a few things that we had wrong, because I looked at my numbers wrong, but they still fit. They're still valid numbers. Okay. So again, this brings us back to Nehemiah's final reforms. So what is this period of 12 years between these reforms? Like, why did these reforms fail? And what does Nehemiah's final reforms, what are they trying to tell us? Because we have this story of Tobiah being kicked out of this chamber, right? The chamber in which the offerings for the priests and the Levites were supposed to be stored, right? Or the Levites, the singers, the porters, the offerings of the priests. Any thoughts on that? Angela, do you get any thoughts?
No, I was thinking of something else, actually. Didn't know I wasn't muted.
Okay. Yeah. So it says, in verse 7, I came to Jerusalem and understood of the evil that Eliashib did for Tobiah in preparing him a chamber in the courts of the house of God. Now, one of the things that came out last week was Dwight had been watching a video dealing with that guy. What's the name? Can't think of it. Yeah, Conrad Vine. Yeah, thanks. Every time I always think of Vance Farrell for some reason, but I know that's not the right name. That's where my brain goes. Right. So dealing with the offerings and something about the fact that they were originally offered as food offerings, not money. Now, what was the significance of that, Dwight? Like, why did he bring that up? Like, what was his point? I should watch the video.
Well, the ultimate point had been to address what it really meant initially to offer a tithe of all of the increase.
Right. Which was always the increase, not not your income.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Now, of course, in a different world, right, because we live in a much different world, we don't live in a rural society. Adventism had chosen to use a 10% of your income. Now, and I've had this debate, I guess, with people because I know some people, they would say, well, every penny that comes in, I give a tithe of that. Every dollar that comes in, I tithe it, they would say. And I said, well, I can't do that because I ran a business. I said I also have expenses, right? If I tithe every dollar that came in, I don't even make 10% of every dollar that comes in. So, I would be paying more tithe than my actual money I live off of, right? So, uh, so, uh, so anyway, that's something that to consider. We have to consider about this dealing with the tithes and what that means. Now, Angela asks a question: why did they read the law on the first day of the seventh month? In 444, for instance. So we're saying here in 432, they also read it on the first day of the seventh month. But the question is, why did they read it on the first day of the seventh month in 444? Is that what you're asking? Like, why would they have decided to read it on the first day of the seventh month in
Yeah,
444?
why the first day of the seventh month instead of the 15th day of the seventh month?
I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I'm just these crazy things come into my mind.
Yeah. So initially it's set up based on Deuteronomy.
31.
Is it 31:10?
Yeah, 10 and 11.
Okay. 31:10. Yeah. So we have like the same digits as 13 verse 1, but just reverse the 31 and the 13 in reverse. Yeah. So, but they're going to choose in 444 to do it on the first day of the seventh month on Rosh Hashanah rather than and that's why I'm saying that they would probably continue doing it that way. But we don't know for certain, right? I mean, it could be the 15th day of the seventh month that they're reading it here in 432. What we do know is that, but the reason why I take it is because when they say on that day, right? So to me, it seems that it's an echo of 444. But whatever day we start in 444, if we go to that date in 432, it's going to be 4,400 days. But I think anyway, my suggestion is that it's the first day of the seventh month that they're going to read it this time as well. But why they choose that over the 15th day, I don't know. Well, they're going to keep in 444 when they read it, they say they're going to keep the 15th day, right? Which they do. So they're going to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Now we have other times in which the book of the law is read, and it's read in the spring, right? So it's not always in the fall. Okay, so there's lots of loose threads. We've just kind of teased all these threads out, and now we realize we're going to have to somehow pull these together. But we can see the logic of what Stephen did yesterday in looking at these numbers, and that they tie us to July 4th, 2026, and that they tie us to Trump, and they tie us back to Nehemiah's reforms. And then we also had just one other thing. So that number that he had, because we kind of didn't finish that. So we had the 2770, which we tied to July 27th. And then he added the midst of the week, 31, to get 2801. Now, 2801 has a lot of interesting things about it. It's the 408th prime number. Is that correct?
That's what Stephen said.
Yeah. Okay. So that ties us to the end of the 70 weeks, or the 7 weeks, I should say, the 7 weeks. So the end of this period. So it's showing that this period at the beginning of the 70 weeks, that in which these decrees occur are to be tied with our history at the end, right? So there's some kind of structural symmetry there, like a chiasm of some sort. Now then you did with the 2801, you had, I'm trying to remember what you subtracted.
I think I added 677.
Oh, you added 677. Okay, so you added the starting year of the 25. Okay, I see what you're doing. So you're taking the 70 weeks and you're tying it, because you have the end of the 25-20, you're just tying it back to the beginning of the 25-20, right?
Yeah,
So then you get 3478. So what was that?
that's 74 times
47.
47.
Okay. So it gives us this mirror. Okay. So again, that's another thing that relates to a mirror structure that we would need to understand, that the beginning and the ending of this is tied together. And this
Yeah,
fits
so I
in.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I connected that to the 47th president on the July 4.
Yeah, exactly. So we can tie this whole structure together to Trump being this reformer, paralleling Nehemiah. So, okay. Well, let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful, Lord, once again that we could have this time this morning to look over these things that Stephen had presented yesterday. And we just pray for your continued presence as we try to understand them, as we try to understand the connection between these past histories and our present situation, and the role that we should take in giving a message to the world around us. So we just ask, Lord, that you can be with each person, bless them in their personal studies, and help us to understand these things fully. And we pray this in Jesus' name.